எல்லா அரசியல்வாதிக்கும் என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் மனித நேயம் தான் இருக்கிறதுலே முக்கிய குணம். அதுக்கப்புறம் உங்கள் பணியை உங்களால் சரியாக நிறைவேற்ற முடியவில்லை என்றால் அப்போ மக்களுக்கு முழு பலன் கிடைக்கிறதில்லை. அப்படியே வாழைப்பழத்தில் ஊசி ஏற்றுற மாதிரி கொண்டு போனால் தான் இதெல்லாம் நிறைவேற்ற முடியும். வெளிப்படையாக நாங்கள் சொல்ல ஆரம்பிச்சிட்டோன்னா பயங்கரமாக எதிர்ப்பு வரும். ஏன் இந்த மாதிரிலாம் நடக்குது, இதெல்லாம் பண்ணக்கூடாது, இதை விளைவு கரெக்டாக வருது, ஜனநாயக முறையில் தான் பண்ணுறோம், எல்லாம் உண்மை. ஆனால் அனாவசியமாக எதிரி உருவாக்க வேணான்றதுக்காக இதை அப்படியே அடக்கி வாசிச்சுட்டு விளைவு லெட் த ரிசல்ட் ஸ்பீக் ஃபார் தெம் செல்ஸ்ன்ற மாடலில் நாங்கள் இருக்கோம். அது உறுதியாக தெளிவாக சொல்கிறேன். போன வருஷமும் மிகப்பெரிய மாற்றம், இந்த வருஷம் அதே போல் மிகப்பெரிய மாற்றம் வரும். இது எனக்கு நல்ல வேலைக்கு நான் வால் ஸ்ட்ரீட்டில் இருந்தபோது நல்லா எனக்கு பாடம் கற்றுருச்சு. நீ ட்ரேடராக இருந்தேன்னா உனக்கு பிஎன்எல் பொறுத்து போனஸ். அதனால் நீ வாயை மூடிட்டு பணத்தை வாங்கிட்டு போகிறவனுக்கு எந்த பிரச்சனையும் இல்லை. இவ்வளோ வாங்கினேன் அவ்வளோ வாங்கினேன்னு சொன்னால் 10 பேருக்கு பொறாமை வரும், எதிர்ப்பு வரும். இது வரைக்கும் நான் வாழ்க்கையில் என்னெல்லாம் சொன்னேன்னா சேர்த்து வச்சிங்கன்னா அது குஜராத் முதலமைச்சர் திரு நரேந்திர மோடி சொன்னதில் 50% கூட வராது. ஏங்க நம்ம மாத்திரம் முன்னேறணும், ஏங்க என்னுடைய சகோதரர்களை ஹிந்தி பெல்ட்டில் பின்தங்கி வச்சுருக்கிறீங்க, உயர்த்துங்க அப்படின்னு தான் நான் கேட்குறேனே தவிர பணத்தை கூடுதல் கொடுன்னு நான் கேட்கல. I don't deserve to get re-elected. It's an efficient market. There's no யாருக்கும் இது உரிமை கிடையாதுல்ல, போராடி தானே வாங்கணும். நல்ல அரசியல்வாதிக்கு, நல்ல அரசாங்கத்துக்கு, நல்ல கழகத்துக்கு என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் 2 முக்கிய அம்சங்கள், குணம், அடையாளம். ஒன்று இருக்கிறதுலே முக்கியமானது, முதல் மனித நேயம். எங்கெல்லாம் ஒரு தவறு நடக்குதோ அதெல்லாம் தடுக்கணும் என்று நினைக்கிறதும், அதெல்லாம் திருத்தணும் என்று நினைக்கிறதும், மக்களுக்கு இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு தூணாக வேறு எங்கேயும் போக முடியலன்னா பிடிஆர் வீட்டுக்கு போனால் ஏதாவது எங்களுக்கு கிடைக்கும், ஒரு நியாயம் கிடைக்கும், நன்மை கிடைக்கும்ன்ற ஒரு அடையாளத்தை that I think is the core for me and I think for all good politicians. எல்லா அரசியல்வாதிக்கும் என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் மனித நேயம் தான் இருக்கிறதுலே முக்கிய குணம். ஆனால் 2வது குணம் செயல்திறன். நீங்கள் இருக்கிறதுலே நல்ல மனிதனாக இருந்துட்டு அதுக்கப்புறம் உங்கள் பணியை உங்களால் சரியாக நிறைவேற்ற முடியவில்லை என்றால் அப்போ மக்களுக்கு முழு பலன் கிடைக்கிறதில்லை. அதனால் எம்எல்ஏயாக இருக்கும்போது, எதிர்கட்சி எம்எல்ஏ இருக்கும்போது இட்ஸ் ஹார்டர் டு மெஷர். ஒரு அளவுக்கு எந்த எம்எல்ஏ எவ்வளோ சிறப்பாக இருக்காங்க சொல்கிறதுக்கு கஷ்டம். ஆனால் அதே சமயத்தில் அந்த ஜூனியர் விகடனில் ஏதோ மிக சிறப்பாக பணியாற்றின எம்எல்ஏன்னு ஒரு தடவை பேட்டி போட்டிருந்தாங்க, யாரோ கேள்வி கேட்டதுக்கு. அதே மாதிரி ஏதோ ஒரு அவார்ட்ஸ் செரமனியில் டாப் 10 எம்எல்ஏஸில் போனேன். ஸோ ஐ கேன் ஷோ. ஏன்னா நான் 6 மாதத்துக்கு ஒரு தடவை ஒரு அறிக்கையை வீடு வீடாக போய் கொடுக்குறேன். என்ன பண்ணேன், பண்ணல, எத்தனை திட்டத்தை நிறைவேற்றினேன், எங்கெல்லாம் தொகுதி மேம்பாட்டு நிதி போச்சு, எத்தனை புகார் வந்துச்சு, அதில் எத்தனை நிறைவேற்றப்பட்டது. அதனால் ஒரு ப்ரொஃபஷ்னலிசமோ இல்லை ஒரு தெளிவோ ஒரு டிரான்ஸ்பேரன்சியோ கொண்டாந்ததில் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைந்தேன் சட்டமன்ற உறுப்பினராக. ஆனால் இன்றைக்கு அமைச்சராக இருக்கும்போது எனக்கு மாநில அளவில் கடமை இருக்குது, என் தலைவர் கொடுத்த வாய்ப்பினால். அது நான் இங்கே அவர் அனாவசியமாக புகழ்கிறேன்னு நினைக்காதீங்க. 2வது முறை சட்டமன்ற உறுப்பினர், முதல் முறை அமைச்சருக்கு இவ்வளோ ஒரு பெரிய பொறுப்பை, அதாவது நிதியமைச்சர் என்ற பொறுப்பை கொடுத்தது உறுதியாக ஒரு புரட்சி. இட்ஸ் ரெவல்யூஷன், இட்ஸ் ஃபண்டமெண்டல் டிரான்ஸ்ஃபர்மேஷன். இப்போ யூபி ஃபைனான்ஸ் மினிஸ்டர் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அவர் 9 டைம்ஸ் எம்எல்ஏ. நாளைக்கு என்ன இல்லத்துக்கு உணவு சாப்பிட வர்றாரு துஷ்யந்த் சௌத்தாலா, அவர் டெப்டி சீஃப் மினிஸ்டர். நார்மலி சீஃப் மினிஸ்டரோ இல்லை இன்றைக்கி ஃபைனான்ஸ் மினிஸ்டர்ஸ் மீட்டிங்க்கு டெல்லியில் போனோன்னா, ஸ்டேட் ஃபைனான்ஸ் மினிஸ்டர்ஸ் வித் யூனியன் ஃபைனான்ஸ் மினிஸ்டர் போனோன்னா ஒரு 6-7 சீஃப் மினிஸ்டர்ஸ் ஹவ் கெப்ட் ஃபைனான்ஸ், ஒரு 6-7 டெப்டி சீஃப் மினிஸ்டர்ஸ் ஹவ் கெப்ட் ஃபைனான்ஸ். பாக்கி 15 தான் ஆக்சுவலாக வெறும் ஃபைனான்ஸ் மினிஸ்டர். அந்த 15 பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு 13 பேர் நம்பர் 2ஓ நம்பர் 3ஓ இருப்பாங்க பார்ட்டியில். அவங்களுக்கு தான் நிதித்துறை கொடுக்கப்படும். அப்போ இவ்வளோ ஒரு அன்எக்ஸ்பெக்டட் ரெவல்யூஷனரி முடிவை எடுத்து என்னிடம் இந்த வாய்ப்பை கொடுத்தது. அதற்கு நான் செய்ய வேண்டிய கடமை கைமாறு சிறப்பாக விளைவை கொண்டாந்து சேர்க்கணும். அதில் நான் என்ன சொல்லுவேன்னா, ஐ ஹாவ் த எக்ஸாக்ட் ஆப்போசிட் ப்ராப்ளம் ஆஃப் பீயிங் எம்எல்ஏ. ஏன்னா விளைவு மிகவும் நல்லா வருது, ரொம்ப ரொம்ப நல்லா. நான் எதிர்பார்க்கறதுக்கு மேல் என்னால் அவருடைய ஆதரவினால் மாற்றத்தை கொண்டாந்து சிறப்பான விளைவை உருவாக்க முடியுது. இல்லை என்ன ஒரே பிரச்சனைனா, நாங்கள் என்னெல்லாம் பண்ணுறோம், நாங்கள் 100 முயற்சி 200 முயற்சி எடுக்கிறோம், அதனால தான் விளைவு வருது. எதுவும் வானத்துலேருந்து உழுகிறது இல்லை. நத்திங் இன் லைஃப் கம்ஸ் ஃப்ரீ லைக் தட். அப்போது இந்த விளைவு எந்தெந்த முயற்சியினால் வர்றது, எந்தெந்த மாற்றத்தினால் வருது, எந்தெந்த ஜியோவினால், எந்தெந்த புது சிஸ்டத்தினால், எந்தெந்த புது கட்டுப்பாட்டினால் அப்படின்றது வெளிப்படையாக என்ன சொல்ல முடியவில்லை. ஏன் சொல்ல முடியவில்லைன்னா, அப்படியே வாழைப்பழத்தில் ஊசி ஏற்றுற மாதிரி கொண்டு போனால் தான் இதெல்லாம் நிறைவேற்ற முடியும். வெளிப்படையாக நாங்கள் சொல்ல ஆரம்பிச்சிட்டோன்னா பயங்கரமாக எதிர்ப்பு வரும். ஏன் இந்த மாதிரிலாம் நடக்குது, இதெல்லாம் பண்ணக்கூடாது, இதை விளைவு கரெக்டாக வருது, ஜனநாயக முறையில் தான் பண்ணுறோம், எல்லாம் உண்மை. ஆனால் அனாவசியமாக எதிரி உருவாக்க வேணான்றதுக்காக இதை அப்படியே அடக்கி வாசிச்சுட்டு விளைவு லெட் த ரிசல்ட் ஸ்பீக் ஃபார் தெம்செல்வ்ஸ்ன்ற மாடலில் நாங்கள் இருக்கோம். அது உறுதியாக தெளிவாக சொல்கிறேன். போன வருஷமும் மிகப்பெரிய மாற்றம், இந்த வருஷம் அதே போல் மிகப்பெரிய மாற்றம் வரும். அப்போ அந்த அளவுக்கு மனப்பான்மை இருக்கணும். That you should let the results speak even though you cannot go and say what it is you're doing. இது எனக்கு நல்ல வேலைக்கு நான் வால் ஸ்ட்ரீட்டில் இருந்தபோது நல்லா எனக்கு பாடம் கற்றுருச்சு. நீ ட்ரேடராக இருந்தேன்னா உனக்கு பிஎன்எல் பொறுத்து போனஸ். அதனால் நீ வாயை மூடிட்டு பணத்தை வாங்கிட்டு போகிறவனுக்கு எந்த பிரச்சனையும் இல்லை. இவ்வளோ வாங்கினேன் அவ்வளோ வாங்கினேன்னு சொன்னால் 10 பேருக்கு பொறாமை வரும், எதிர்ப்பு வரும். அதனால் யூ மஸ்ட் ரிமைன் ஃபோக்கஸ்ட் ஆன் த அவுட்கம், நாட் ஆன் த நான் என்றைக்காவது ஒரு நாள் நான் ஒரு நூல் எழுதி என்ன தான் நடந்துச்சு எப்படி தான் நடந்துச்சுன்னு அன்றைக்கி நான் எழுதி வச்சுட்டு போகிறேன் தவறுறதுக்கு முன்னால். இப்போது விளைவு வந்துட்டுருக்கு. அது என் தலைவருக்கு செய்ய வேண்டிய கடமை. அது மிகவும் எனக்கு மனநிறைவு கொடுக்கும்.
Before the next question, quick அதை சம்மரைஸ் பண்ணணும்னா, if I can say, what you don't measure you cannot manage அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு பீட்டர் ட்ரக்கர் சொல்லியிருக்காரு. ஒரு கான்ஸ்டிடுவன்சி நம்ம ஜெயிச்சிட்டோம், அடுத்த 5 வருஷம் கழிச்சு போகலாம் அப்படின்றது was a trend earlier. A key lesson probably is that on a half yearly basis, here is a man who says நான் இதான் இந்த 6 மாதம் பண்ணியிருக்கேன், and distributing that within the constituency, which has about approximately 3,20,000 voters, is another key lesson that we have to be in touch with the voter. You voted me to power, I am responsible to you. பிடிஆர் வீட்டுக்கு போனால் இந்த எனக்கு நடக்கும் அப்படின்ற அந்த நம்பிக்கையை ஏற்படுத்துறது. மூன்றாவது விஷயம் எனக்கு ரொம்ப பிடிச்சது அவர் சொன்னது என்னென்னா, there is definitely a very strategic understanding and that's why we are together on the same dais. If that is your question. If there will be a coalition, I am party agnostic. Yeah. So I am a part of the 20% now. Yeah. Sir, you may want to take that.
Everybody has a day job. I'm no longer in the IT wing. I'm no longer in any major role in the party. In fact, my leader has given me one role more for legacy reasons. My father used to be in the Sottu Padagappu Kulu of the Thimuka. He has now named me Sailalar of that Kulu. So that's more of an internal function. So I'm very far removed from coalition strategy, election manifesto and all that. So I'll do my job as a minister. Some greater minds and power than me will figure out how to leverage Mr. Swaminathan's talents, I'm sure. I have no part in that.
That was a very political answer, the last part of it. நான் இப்போ என்ன மறந்துட்டேன்னு சொன்ன ஒரே நிமிஷம் நான் அதை முடிச்சிடுறேன். A very very key lesson, okay? அவர் சொன்ன எல்லாத்துலேயும், if you want to be successful in politics, வாயை மூடிட்டு வேலையை மட்டும் பண்ணுங்க. இது என்னுடைய அனுபவத்தில். I will keep sharing a lot of these examples over the next 3 days. Yes, Jagan.
Good morning, sir. The moment I registered for this program, I started reading one of the book also. And it is creating a lot of spark. Many people are ruling India. When do you predict a Tamil person will come as a prime minister?
So, first of all, that's not my book. I'll tell you an interesting story. The same publisher asked me about 2 years ago whether I would be interested in writing that book. And I'll tell a little bit of a personal anecdote here. So happened that day I was having lunch with, please sit. No, I was having lunch with our advisor Prashant Kishore and some other people. And because it was such a shock to me that the publisher asked me this question, Lunch conversation, I asked him, what do you think, PK, what should I do? He said, no, Thiaga, whatever happens, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I said, why? He said, hey, you're just starting your career. Once you put something on paper that says this is good, that is bad and all that, you have to live with that for the next 20, 30 years. You say you have no interest in Delhi, but someday you may find yourself in Delhi. And if you find yourself, why do you want to have already alienated somebody by saying you are not good, this is bad, this, that? So whatever happens, you don't write the book and சொன்னாரு. அந்த advice எடுத்துக்கிட்டு நான் உடனே வேணாங்க வேறு யாரையாவது தேடுங்கன்னு அன்றைக்கே சொல்லிட்டேன். Somebody else wrote the book, somebody I know. They asked for a blurb, so the blurb is on the cover. That's all. My name is on the cover for that reason. But I would say something much more basic than that. And I said it to the 15th Finance Commission in my official, on behalf of the DMK, நான் உட்காந்து ராத்திரியாக டைப் அடித்து தலைவர் உத்தரவோடு அடுத்த நாள் போய் இங்கே என்கே சிங் கமிட்டி இங்கே வந்து முது கொடுத்தேன். I said, successive finance commissions have been utter failures in one respect. The idea of transfers of wealth in a federal economy, in whether it's United States or India or China or European Union, is that yes, you must take from the well-offs and give it to the less well because you want to harmonize this notion of equality. We can't say Tamil Nadukulla சமநிலைக்காக போராடுறோம் ஆனால் இந்தியாவில் இல்லை ஏன் பணம் எடுத்து வேற யார். We say no problem, we're good citizens, take the money, no problem. The point is that in most societies, when they take money from the well-to-do and give it to the less well-off, the gap closes. The reason for making the transfer is to reduce the inequality and increase the equality, reduce the gap. So if you see what happens in America, you take from the rich states, the New York, Californias, Minnesotas, Washingtons, you give it to the Missouris, Kansas, Alabamas, the gap closes, or North Dakotas. In China, you take from the coastal provinces, give it to the heartland, the gap closes. In Europe, you take from the rich Western economies, you give it to the Portugal, Italy's, Greece's, the gap closes. India, 25 வருஷமா, the gap has kept on increasing. Not just that, just take Tamil Nadu. At one point, Tamil Nadu was 7.5% of the population, 7.5% of the GDP, and we used to get about 7% of the devolution, which was the horizontal split between states. Vertical union or state விட்டுருங்க. Now we are about 6% of the population, we think, because the government has not bothered to run a census, which was due in 21. So the last accurate data we have goes back to 2011. 12 வருஷம் பழைய தகவலை வச்சு அரசு நடத்திட்டு இருக்கோம் நம்ம. But we are about 6% of the population. We are about 10.5% of the GDP. And we are about 4% of the tax split. அப்போனா நம்மளுடைய பர் கேபிட்டா ப்ரொடக்டிவிட்டியும் கான்ட்ரிபியூஷன் இன் டாக்ஸஸும் இன்க்ரீஸ் பண்ணிக்கிட்டே போயிட்டுருக்கு. நம்மளுக்கு திரும்பி வர பணம் குறைஞ்சி போயிட்டே இருக்குது. அப்போனா the transfers, not only are they not reducing inequality, not only are they not stabilizing inequality, not only are they crystallizing inequality at the same ratio, they're actually accelerating inequality. That is, Tamil Nadu keeps on getting better, and faster Bihar gets worse and worse. So this, I told him, unless you find a way to change the incentivization, எதற்காக கூடுதல் பணம் கொடுக்குறீங்க, it can't be just because they have a deficit, it can't be just because they have not had development. You have to seek interim measures that will lead to longer term outcomes. 5 வருஷத்துக்கு ஒரு தடவை உனக்கு வளர்ச்சி இல்லைன்றதுனால நான் கூடுதல் பணம் கொடுக்குறேன்னா, where is the incentive to get வளர்ச்சி? So I said, instead you should say, ஆண்டுக்கு ஆண்டு நாங்கள் செக் பண்ணுவோம், and you can start with measures like எத்தனை சதவீதம் பெண்கள் 15 வயசுக்கோ 12 வயசுலையோ ஸ்கூலில் இருக்காங்க, எத்தனை பேருக்கு menstrual hygiene கொடுக்கப்பட்டு கண்டினியூ பண்ணுவோம். ஏன்னா there is a strong correlation in the book, it says, between getting menstrual hygiene and continuing to high school. If half your population doesn't even get a high school education, how will your society improve? We still got a lot of work to do after that. I was at the Lady Doak convocation last Saturday, 1280 students get degree கொடுத்தேன். கேள்வி, எத்தனை பேர் அவ்வளோ சிறப்பான ஒரு பெரிய வரலாறு இருக்கிற கல்லூரியில் படிச்சுட்டு the competition to get in is 5:1 or 10:1, how many of them will join the kind of formal economy in jobs as entrepreneurs, as officers, etc., or come to public life? Percentage is too low. So we are educating them, we are not providing them enough of a platform to actually engage. Look around this room, what percentage of women here? right? But if you look at the high school graduation rates, 50% or more are women. So somewhere even we are not doing enough. But they are not even getting them into middle school, elementary school தாண்டி வரதுக்கே இல்லை. இதுக்கு நீங்கள் பணம் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா 10 வருஷம் கழிச்சு ஏதாவது விளைவு கிடைக்கும். சும்மா நீங்கள் எவ்வளோ ஏழையாக இருக்கீங்கன்றதுக்காக பணம் கொடுத்துட்டே இருந்தீங்கன்னா இட்ஸ் இன்சென்டிவைசிங் them to stay poor. If this continues, at some point the part of the country that is giving more and more and getting less and less will start asking the question, what's in it for me? Why should this union continue the same way ன்னு கேட்டு உங்களுக்கு பிரச்சனை வரப்போகுதுன்னு ஃபார்மலாக எழுதி கொடுத்தேன். அதுதான் எனக்கு பயமாக இருக்கே தவிர யார் இங்கேருந்து அங்கே போய் உட்காரவங்களாம் யாருக்கு சொல்ல முடியும். there have been some, there will be others.
வணக்கம் சார். காமேஷ், தமிழ்நாடு இளைஞர் கட்சி ஜல்லிக்கட்டு டீம். முதல்ல வாழ்த்துக்கள் சார். 1240 கோடி ரூபாய் இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட் கம்மி பண்ணி கொடுத்ததுக்கும் 4.5% டெபிசிட் இது பண்ணதுக்கும் 40,000 கோடி வந்து நம்மளோட கடனை வந்து இன்னும் கம்மி பண்ணதுக்கும் வாழ்த்துக்கள் சார். ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம். ஸோ மை கொஸ்டின் இஸ் தட் எனி மினிஸ்ட்ரி யார் எடுத்தாலும் சொல்ற பிரச்சனை என்ன அப்படின்னா, எங்களோட வளர்ச்சியே பண்ண முடியாத காரணம் வந்து நாங்கள் வந்து கொடுக்குற சம்பளமே பட்ஜெட் அலோகேஷன் வந்து சம்பளத்துக்கே போயிட்டு. நீங்கள் வந்து டிரான்ஸ்போர்ட்டாக எடுத்தாலும் சரி, இபியாக எடுத்தாலும் சரி, இன்ஃபேக்ட் வந்து கல்வித்துறையில் இருந்தாலும் சரி, எல்லாருமே வந்து நாங்கள் சம்பளத்துக்கே எங்களோட வந்து ஆல்மோஸ்ட் 80% வந்து போயிடுது. இதுக்கப்புறம் எங்களோட குரோத் கொடுக்க முடியலன்ற மாதிரி ஒரு ப்ராப்ளமாக சொல்லிட்டு இருக்காங்க. இந்த இன்ட்ரென்சஸ் ஓவர் கம் பண்ணுறதுக்கு எனி ஐடியாலஜி ஹேவ் சார் இந்த ஃபியூச்சர் இயர்ஸில்? ஏன்னா இது கவர்மெண்ட் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட்டு, கவர்மெண்ட் ஸ்டாஃப், ஸோ அதை வச்சு நான் கேட்டுக்கிறேன்.
இல்லை நான் வந்து துறை அமைச்சர், அதனால் நான் ரொம்ப கேர்ஃபுல்லாக பேசணும். ஏற்கனவே எல்லா ஜாக்டோஜியோ எல்லா யூனியன்ஸும் போராட்டத்தில் இருக்காங்க. அதாவது அமைச்சர் PTR வந்து எங்களுக்கெல்லாம் நல்ல நண்பர் இல்லை, நல்ல கவனம் செலுத்தலை, நாங்கள் கேட்குற கூடுதல் டிஏ, கூடுதல் பெனிஃபிட்ஸு, பழைய ஓய்வு திட்டம் என்னமோலாம் நிறைவேற்றலை, நான் முதலமைச்சர் நல்லவர், நிதியமைச்சர் தான் எல்லாம் கண்ட்ரோல் பண்ணி வச்சுருக்கான்ற ஒரு வதந்தி ஏற்கனவே பரப்பிட்டுருக்காங்க. அதனால் நான் இதிலெல்லாம் மேக்ரோ எக்கனாமிக் ரீதியாக நீங்கள் சொல்கிறது ரொம்ப கரெக்டு. நான் ஐ கோ பேக் டு I'll give a parallel. I used to work in an investment bank. Investment banks, like great luxury was that you had relatively high leverage and you had relatively low risk. ஏன்னா ஒரு காலத்தில் சொல்லுவாங்க கமர்ஷியல் பேங்க்குக்கும் இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட் பேங்க்கும் என்ன வித்தியாசம்? கமர்ஷியல் பேங்க் இஸ் இந்த ஸ்டோரேஜ் பிஸ்னஸ், அதாவது பணத்தை வாங்கி அது கடனாக கொடுத்து அதை வட்டி வாங்கி திருப்பி, ஸோ தே ஆர் ஸ்டோரிங் லோன்ஸ். இதுதான் கமர்ஷியல் பேங்க், தேர் இந்த ஸ்டோரேஜ் பிஸ்னஸ். இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட் பேங்க்ஸ் ஆர் இந்த மூவிங் பிஸ்னஸ். நம்ம வந்து ஒரு IPO கொண்டாடுறோம், ஒரு டெட் டீலை கொண்டாடுறோம், இன்றைக்கி அண்டர்ரைட் பண்ணுறோம், நாளைக்கு டிஸ்போஸ் பண்ணிடுறோம், மார்ஜின் ஏற்றுறோம். ஸோ இட்ஸ் அ ஹை மார்ஜின் லோ ரிஸ்க் பிஸ்னஸ். மூவிங் பிஸ்னஸ் மச் பெட்டர் than ஸ்டோரேஜ் பிஸ்னஸ். Because of that, if you looked at commercial banks, the cost of employees, salaries, bonuses and all used to be 25-30%. Right? There will be other risk management systems, infrastructure, real estate, branches, and all. And the return on equity will be about 10, 12, 8 in the mari. Investment bank pathina, the return on equity will be 30, 32, 35%, and the employees will be making 50-55% of the total revenue. அப்போ பாக்கி 15-18% என்ன இருக்கணும்? கட்டடம் இருக்கணும், IT இருக்கணும், ட்ராவல் எக்ஸ்பென்ஸ் இருக்கணும், அவ்வளோதான். உங்களுக்கு மூளையும் பிராண்ட் நேமும் ஒரு ஹை ரெண்ட் டிஸ்ட்ரிக்டில் பயங்கர ஸ்கை ஸ்கிரேப்பர் இருந்தால் போதும். யூ டோன்ட் ஹேவ் எனி அதர் காஸ்ட். In that business, in the two most people-sensitive businesses that I have seen and I have understood in the world, which is high-end management consulting like McKinsey, etc., or high-end, what used to be in the day before the crisis, pure-play investment banking like Goldman Sachs, Lehman or Morgan Stanley, etc., more than 50% of the total revenue used to go to employee compensation. That was considered the elite of the elite, right? In our government, much greater ratios than that go to the government employees' salaries and pensions. That means the total employee cost is, as you say, a great proportion. Is that a sustainable model or not? The people of Tamil Nadu have to think about. அதுக்கு மேலே நான் சொன்னேன்னா என் பேர் கெட்டு போயிடும், எனக்கு அன்வசியம் பிரச்சனை.
இங்கேன்னு இல்லை, எந்த ஆர்கனைசேஷனுமே எடுத்தீங்கன்னா கூட ஓனர் நல்லவராக இருப்பார், அக்கௌண்டன்ட் தான் கெட்டு பேர் வாங்கிட்டு இருப்பாப்புல. ஸோ மோர் ஆர் லெஸ் தி சேம் திங். எஸ் சார்.
விகாசத்திற்கு மாவட்டம் ஒன்றிய கவுன்சிலராக இருக்கு. நீங்கள் சொன்னது போல ஒரு கவுன்சிலர் லெவலில் தான் பள்ளிகள் ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. 30% அந்த பர்சனல் கணக்கில் நம்மளோட திராவிட ஐடியாலஜிஸ் பார்க்கும்போது பார்த்தீங்கன்னா நம்ம வந்து மாநில உரிமை, மொழி உரிமை, இப்போ நீங்கள் சொல்கிற பொருளாதார உரிமை கேட்கும் போது மற்றவங்க என்ன பார்க்குறாங்க, நம்ம உடனே ஒரு பிரிவினைட்டாகவும் வேற ஒரு ஷேடு கொடுத்து அந்த ஆர்குமெண்ட்டையும் அந்த நம்மளோட நல்ல கருத்துக்களை உருவாங்க மாட்டாங்க. இது நம்ம அவங்க சேர்த்து அதை குறையாக பார்க்குறோம். அதை நிவர்த்தி பண்ணுறதுக்கு நம்ம சேர்ந்து நம்ம ஒரு ஆக்டிவிட்டி இந்தியன்ஸ் நம்ம ஆனால் பார்க்க பார்த்தா நம்ம வேற மாதிரி ஒரு டாக் பண்ணுறாங்க. நீங்கள் பிரிவினைவாதியா இல்லை மாநில உரிமை பெரிய டாபிக் வந்து
நான் ரெண்டு பதில் சொல்கிறேன், ரொம்ப சுருக்கமாக பதில் சொல்கிறேன். முதல் பதில் வந்து இது வரைக்கும் மாநில உரிமை பற்றியோ ஜிஎஸ்டியோடைய பிழைவுகளை பற்றியோ இல்லை ஒன்றிய அரசோடைய அத்துமீறல் இன்டு ஸ்டேட் சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ், அதாவது த்ரூ சென்ட்ரலி ஸ்பான்சர்ட் ஸ்கீம்ஸ் அவங்க ஸ்டேட் சப்ஜெக்ட் கான்ஸ்டியூஷனில் இருக்கிற ஸ்டேட் சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸில் கை வைக்கிறத பற்றியோ இது வரைக்கும் நான் வாழ்க்கையில் என்னெல்லாம் சொன்னேன்னா சேர்த்து வச்சிங்கன்னா அது குஜராத் முதலமைச்சர் திரு நரேந்திர மோடி சொன்னதில் 50% கூட வராது. தெளிவாக சொல்கிறேன். Everything I have ever said on all the subjects of states' rights, avoidance of central intrusion, problems with the GST is less than 50% of the statements made by our Honorable Prime Minister when he was the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat. The difference is, as they say in politics, where he stands on the issue depends on which seat he sits. He happened to sit in one seat one day, today he sits in another seat. His stand on the policy has become night and day. At least I've never had the opportunity, so who knows whether my stand will change. I've only sat in one seat, my stand stays the same. Now wait till I'll say the second thing. The second thing is that when I had this problem with the 15th Finance Commission, and then in many debates where people start painting me as somehow not patriotic, saying that I grudge that we give only 1 rupee and get back, we give 1 rupee and get back only 35. I said, that's not what I'm grudging. I am grudging that 65 that you don't send back to me is not being spent usefully, and therefore my fellow citizens who are residing in UP or Bihar or Haryana or Rajasthan are not getting the quality of life that my Tamil brothers and sisters are getting. So I'm saying it as a patriot, I'm not saying it as a Pirivanavadi. ஏங்க நம்ம மாத்திரம் முன்னேறணும், ஏங்க என்னுடைய சகோதரர்களை ஹிந்தி பெல்ட்டில் பின்தங்கி வச்சிருக்கிறீங்க, அவங்கள உயர்த்துங்க அப்படின்னு தான் நான் கேட்குறேனே தவிர பணத்தை கூடுதல் கொடுன்னு நான் கேட்கல.
Thank you, sir. We'll take one last question. Yes. What are you studying? Why don't you tell me?
I'm going to be studying politics and economics at Parliament. So what question I want to ask you from your speech, that you said that all of this is and people tend to gravitate towards, big headlines, catchy headlines, and they don't really focus on the important things that matter most of the time. As a politician, how do you think you're going to focus on this kind of cloud information, and how do you deliver these important statistics to people who really understand them but aren't really qualified or engaged in outcomes? They can't be.
That's a very, very important and incisive question. Listen, the market is efficient. எனக்கு திறமை இருக்குது, நான் நல்லவன், என்னுடைய விளைவு நல்லா இருக்குன்னு நான் சொல்லி யாருக்கு பிரயோஜனம்? Either the people believe it and see it is true and it affects their daily lives, அதாவது அவங்க குவாலிட்டி ஆஃப் ட்ரிங்கிங் வாட்டரோ இல்லை அவங்க ஆக்சஸ் டு ஜாப்ஸோ இல்லை அவங்களுடைய ரேஷன்ஸோ இம்ப்ரூவ் பண்ணுதா இல்லையா அப்படின்னா then I am successful. So I completely agree with you. I say that the art of communication, the art of taking complex or quantitative things and making them accessible to people is the key to political success in the day of social media, right? If you cannot do that, you don't deserve to continue. I'll put it a different way. On the one hand, I'll say the people get the government they deserve. They vote, right? Whatever outcome they get is what they deserve. If after that it doesn't come out well, who are they going to complain against? If you don't vote, then you have no chance to complain. But if you vote and you get an outcome, even that there are nuances. They'll say, no, but 37% of the vote determines first past the post system is bad. The Hindi belt, they got average of 60. In South India, they got average of 18. But we're still there. There are all nuances. But broadly speaking, at the most granular level, the people deserve the representative and the government they get because they voted and that's what they get. The flip side of that coin is, if I genuinely am a better performer, a more caring politician, a better execution guy, திருப்பி சொல்கிறேன், மனித நேயமும் செயல்திறனும் எனக்கு இருந்து அதை மக்களிடம் போய் சேர்க்க முடியவில்லை என்றால் எனக்கு தகுதி இல்லை திருப்பி நீடிக்கிறதுக்கு. That's my limitation. So if you want to be a successful politician, beyond these two, you got to have a way of reaching the message to the people in a manner they can absorb it and understand it. And if you can't do it, these two can give you mananiraivu. If you're a believer like me, can give you punyam. Maybe you will increase your credit account with God, but you won't get re-elected. So you have to do that part also exceedingly well. The irony is, many people who can't do number one or number two, who don't have gunam number one or execute at number two, are good at three. So then it's even more imperative on you to find a way to cut through the clutter and get out the... But I would say, I'll end on a positive note. It's much, much easier to do in Tamil Nadu than it is at a pan-India level. Because we have high education, because we have participation of everybody in the economy, because we are 50% urban, because even in the rural areas we have 75% penetration of internet. Let me ask a different question. If WhatsApp University is the way to spread bullshit, basically, that's, or false propaganda, why is it that the masters of false propaganda are not able to make serious inroads in Tamil Nadu? There are more users in Tamil Nadu than any other state per capita. Because once you go past a tipping point, if only 5% or 10% or 20% people have WhatsApp, they are considered the professors of the rest of the people, and only whatever crap they get will penetrate to the rest of the people. But if everybody has WhatsApp, and if everybody has two numbers, and if everybody is getting 100 messages from 40 different groups every day, it's very hard for you to sustain a false narrative for a long period of time. So in a way, the fact that we have such an educated, such a connected, such a aware voting population is a blessing for people. If I really believe I'm doing well, then I have no excuse for not being able to get that message to the people. And if I fail, I don't deserve to get re-elected. It's an efficient market. There's no, யாருக்கும் இது வந்து உரிமை கிடையாதுல்ல, போராடி தானே வாங்கணும். You leave the papers and you leave the propaganda and you leave the public speeches and all out. If I go to the GST Council, or I go to the finance minister's meeting, or I go to meet union finance ministers in Delhi, at the end of the day, their real values, real issues, real math prevails. பேசும்போது எல்லாத்துக்கும் தெரியுது யார் எந்த தயாரிப்போடு வந்திருக்காங்க, யாருடைய கருத்துக்கு என்ன மதிப்பு, எது செய்ய முடியும், எது செய்யலாம். And there I also would say relatively independent of politics. If you go with any reasonable proposal to most ministers in Delhi, they are reasonably accommodative of doing that. If you ask me, is the policy at the top conducive to states, I say no. It is the exact opposite of what then Chief Minister of Gujarat used to argue for federalism. The authoritarianism is exactly opposite of that. But if you ask me at individual minister level or individual decision level, I would say that most people are reasonable human beings and we actually get some things done. So the second aspect of politics, I would say, is that most politicians have some kind of talent. Some of it may be academic, some of it may be people connect, some of it may be just through experience. The other day, UP Finance Minister was at my house for a quick meeting, and he brought two other ministers with him, backward classes and excise. UP Finance Minister is a 9-time MLA. Backward class minister is a 5 or 6-time MLA. Before him, 3 or 4 times, his father was MLA. Now, I'm not saying Varis Arasiyal and all that, but I'm just pointing out that because of this depth of experience, the ability to gauge who is who, which idea actually is a valid or workable idea, which is likely to have successful outcomes, a lot of politicians have grounding in that. They know what is what and who is who. I would say that the general camaraderie and mutual respect in Tamil Nadu has gone up a lot between political parties, at least DMK and ADMK in the last few years. In the time of Ms. Jayalalitha, they were afraid whether they could be seen interacting with anybody else or not. But that kind of fear has fallen away now. In fact, when I was an opposition MLA, then Chief Minister, now leader of the opposition, I went to see the speaker for something and he complimented me. He said, "Neenga eppalam pesrீங்களோ ரொம்ப தெளிவா கருத்தோட பேசுறீங்க." I said, "நன்றி." So, this kind of internal discussion, I think, is a good sign in a democracy, and it's becoming more so. So, as adversarial as it may seem on paper, in fact, on operating level, inside Parliament, inside inside the building, but not in the glare of the TV cameras, things are actually quite conducive, and people are very willing to work with each other. The third thing I would say is that the model of politics is changing dramatically. There used to be a day, if you look at the rise of the Dravidian movement, it was through Thinnai Pracharam, and it was through captivating the young people. It was through the Manavarani, the Ilangirani. That's where the Dravidian ideology grew. And I'm saying before there was a DMK, ADMK and all that, when there was one whole Dravidian movement. And it was based on people who were being discriminated against, understanding that they were being discriminated against, and basically standing up for their rights and putting their vote in the ballot box to match that. Since 1967, some self-professed Dravidian party has always formed the government of Tamil Nadu. That is not a coincidence. It is because there was an alignment between the interests of the majority of the people and the ideology of these parties. Again, I don't want to get into politics, so I'm not going to go much deeper than that. But what I'm going to say is that going back to the Justice Party of 1920 election, or in fact the foundation of the South Indian Liberal Federation in 1916, the ideology was very clear that you must run politics because you are for something, not because you are against something. There's not a long road to have by being against something as your core ideology. So the social justice, the inclusion, the education for all has turned out to be such a winning ideology that it has persisted for a long time. And in fact, even those 30 years or so, between 37 and 67, some part of which there was no government because there was no election because of the Second World War and Indian protests against it and so forth. But even the part of those 30 years that was a non-Justice Party, non-Dravidian, non-DMK, non-ADMK government, the ideology of the Congress or the Swatantra parties that ran the government, that got elected to office with a majority in what was once Madras Presidency, then Madras State, then divided Madras State after the partition of Andhra, and then Tamil Nadu, actually hewed much more closely to the Dravidian ideology than it did to the Congress of the rest of the country. And this was first pointed out to me by none other than former West Bengal Governor Thiru Gopal Krishna Gandhi, who is the grandson of Rajaji in addition to being the grandson of Annal Gandhi. And he explained many of the policies that the Madras Presidency, Congress and Swatantra governments had taken, and how closely they hewed to the Dravidian ideology and not to the Congress of, let's say, Delhi Presidency in those days. In that sense, I also think that while there are many paths to success in politics, if you want long-term success, you better have a clear ideology and you better stick to one ideology. Though people can buy and sell and jump and change, I think those are all short-term successes that could easily turn out to be shorter lived than one would think. It's changing. What do I mean by it's changing? These days, there's a stark difference between North India, what I would consider kind of the Hindi belt, and South India. The primary difference being that in North India, because of relatively lower education levels and because of relatively lower economic progress and relatively lower penetration of technology, you can control the message and the campaign is still in the traditional ways. That is, the two traditional ways, on the ground work, not necessarily by the candidate, but the party mechanism, and through TV and print, right, which is the traditional radio, TV and print. This myth that somehow social media dictates elections is completely wrong in two levels. First, that's certainly not true for North India. It is true to some extent in South India, but that's only at the macro voting level. At the micro level, if I want to stand for MLA and win, I cannot do it without going to every street and every house in my constituency. I could be the king of social media, it doesn't help. In my constituency, I got to be seen as Mr. Local, Mr. Accessible, Mr. Caring, that I did for them what I said I was going to do, and they have access to me, and I attend all their weddings and graha pravesams and kadakuttus and even in grief funerals. So it is a completely different model in the South. In the South, though, things are changing dramatically. First of all, the impact of social media is much, much, much higher than most people realize. And by social media, I don't mean Twitter and Facebook and all that. We are not yet at a level of digitalization of our lives or data ubiquity where you can do targeted campaigning through such platforms. If you're in the US or UK, they know everything about you, right? They know which airline you fly, they know which grocery store you shop, they know how many boxes of cereal of which brand you buy, they know what you eat in the morning, they know what you eat in the evening. They can tailor a message to you based on what their profile categorization of you is. We don't yet have that much data, and maybe we never will, hopefully, on any individual. So here, we only use social media as a kind of macro communication strategy, and by far the most powerful media in the world, by far, by a factor of 10, is YouTube. YouTube is everywhere. YouTube is on every phone that is sold practically, because Android is by far the operating system in India, and YouTube comes installed. And even unlike WhatsApp, you don't need an account to use YouTube. You may need an account to go and give comments and all that. Most people don't care. But to watch, you need nothing. You just need a phone and a cheap data connection, which everybody has. So really the power of communication today rests in YouTube. And with one good YouTube video, you can achieve the outcome of running, 3 big mega rallies in 3 different places in Tamil Nadu. Those look good for TV. You'll have tens of thousands of people, big lights, big cutouts and all that. Whether that translates into votes, so far I'm not sure. I think the voting pattern is very, very, very different. Just like I say, what you read in the news and what's really happening may not be very close to each other. What you see in the rallies and what you see in the votes may not be very close to each other. The voting pattern is incredibly sophisticated. I mean, it's hard for me to overemphasize. The average voter is very, very, very thoughtful, nuanced, and aware of their self-interest, and they vote accordingly. Whatever you think, there is no guaranteed sway. Of course, there are macro trends, right? Macro trends, I would say, are most helpful in an MP election, because the average electorate in Tamil Nadu is about 1.5 million people, 15 lakh people. Yara candidate nirthnalum is not realistic that that candidate can capture the imagination of a significant portion of those 15 lakh people. Very, very rare. So the macro trends, the party, the philosophy, the disgruntlement or the happiness with the outcome, the pro-incumbency or the anti-incumbency, these things can drive the broader, and these can be greatly influenced by social media. You come down to the MLA election level, and this is probably half and half. or it depends on the candidate. In some places, the candidate is very important, maybe up to half the vote. In some cases, the candidate is just another representative of the party. The macro trend will determine the outcome. For the last election, for the first time in Tamil Nadu, we saw a great regional split. We have never seen that kind of split before, where we saw one region lean heavily towards one coalition and the rest of the state lean very, very heavily towards another coalition. That kind of regional split we have never seen before. It has usually been a universal kind of trend across Tamil Nadu. Whether that's a one-off or it portends something is hard for me to say, but things are changing. I do a lot of analysis of data, incredibly detailed, at least certainly that I had not seen when I came in 2016. As you may know, for a while I established and ran the IT wing of the DMK party. So I also have some experience and some background based on that experience. I would say that every election is a different election. I'll just give you one example. In my constituency, Madurai Central, I'm just going to compare 2011 MLA election, 2011 local body election, 2014 MP election, 2016 MLA election, 2019 MP election, 2021 MLA election, and 2022 local body election. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 elections. Just look at the dramatic changes in the voting pattern. 2011, we lost Madurai Central badly, as we did in much of the state, and we lost all 10 constituencies in Madurai district. So there was nothing much to write home about. It was worse than the average, but I mean, some have to be better, some have to be worse. There was nothing dramatic to write about in Madurai Central's 2011 MLA loss. But the 2011 local body elections dealt us a body blow. That time I think we had 21 or 22 wards out of the 100 in my constituency, and we didn't have a single councillor. There we really realized it was granular and down to every, because you see, I stopped at MLA. The place where the candidate matters the most is the local body election, because the average councillor's vote list, voting population or eligible voting population is a few thousand people, except Chennai. Chennai is almost like a mini MLA election because you have 40,000-50,000 voters. But if you go to any other part of Tamil Nadu, particularly if you go into the rural areas or even the other cities like Coimbatore, Trichy, Madurai and all that, average councillor is elected by a eligible voting population of around 10,000 people or less. It's very local. And so it makes a big difference who the individual is. If you see, there are still independents being elected councillor because you can build that kind of rapport with the people when your electorate is only that small. In fact, I'll go the reverse. If all of you want to get into elected office, the easiest and the best and the fastest way is to stand for councillor. For councillor, you don't need anything. If you have a good rapport, if you spend 2-3 years working on that area, if you have built your relationship with that community, in my constituency, let's say the average councillor has 20 streets or 30 streets, and maybe 800 houses. If you have built your relationship, or 1,500 houses, if you have built your relationship with that constituency, they will vote for you independent of everything else. So this is the spectrum of elections. Now I'm saying go back to my original comparison. 2011 lost the MLA, lost the local bodies even more miserably. 2014, again, DMK lost almost, not almost, every single seat we lost. Madurai also was a loss. The loss was probably worse than average. Not big difference, but we lost Madurai Central by 25,000 votes or something like that. 2016, there should have been a local body election, but for various reasons it never ran. So 2016 MLA election, I go and stand, and 2016 MLA election, first time candidate, I couldn't speak Tamil on public stages, so I never spoke at all. I didn't want to make any commitment that I couldn't honor, and I didn't know what I could or couldn't honor because I had not been in office before. So I didn't make any local campaign promise at all, other than the party's manifesto. I didn't make any campaign promise. And, I don't want to talk about other things because it may be taken politically, but I can say that I didn't pay any money. I don't want to say what other people did. And yet I won by about 4% of the vote, about 6,000 votes, 5,800 something votes, at a time when only 2 constituencies of the 10 in Madurai won, and across the state we lost the popular vote by about 1% or something. So I was about a 5% delta to the state average. 2019 rolls around, and it turns out to be a huge wave for various reasons. I don't want to get into that again. But such a wave that what I thought was going to be a 8.5% victory as a core prediction turned out to be a 22% or 21.67% victory for our coalition. I mean, it was just a sweep. Seats that we thought were kind of on the edge, we won by 2 lakh votes. MP seats, I'm saying. But in my constituency, again, of the 6 MLA constituencies in my MP constituency, that is where I'm a voter, my Madurai Central MLA constituency had the highest vote share for the DMK coalition, which was not even a DMK candidate, it was a CPM candidate, first time candidate, had stood and lost at MLA before, but had never even been elected councillor before. So first time big office candidate, CPM. But of the 6 constituencies, we had the greatest vote share in for the DMK and the greatest margin of victory for the DMK in my constituency. That was not true in 2011 and 16, right? I'm talking 2019 now. 2016, of the 2 that won, I only won by 3.8 or 4%. My fellow minister now, Mr. Murthy, won his constituency by 30,000 votes or something, a big difference. But when it came to the MP election, that didn't translate. In 2019, Madurai East, we didn't have that kind of victory. The margin slid by 15,000 votes. But in my constituency, it went up from 5,000 votes to some 20,000 or 25,000 votes. It was a huge surge. Then the MLA elections came around in 2021. This time, around the state, we won by about 7-8%. I don't remember. But in my constituency, again, I didn't give money. But this time I was now going for the 3rd election. I'd gone 16, I'd gone campaigning in 19 for some days, I went in 21 for myself. And this time I won by 34,000 something votes, or 23%. Again, it was very high margin of victory, but just watch the trend. It's from minus to flat to plus to higher. And then 22, we had the local body elections. And I had a serious problem. I had already gone to court saying that the redistricting of the wards was done very one-sidedly, and that my constituency had lost 6 councillors out of 22 because the average voting population in my constituency had gone to 15,000, whereas in my neighbor's constituency, my friend Sellu Raju of the ADMK, he had gone from 15 to 21 wards, and he on average had only 10,000 voters. It was a completely rigged, redistricting. I had gone to court as an MLA against it. Court said, we won't stay it. When the notification comes, you come and ask us. At that time, we'll stay it. Right now, we can't stay something that has not gone into effect because the redistricting would only go into effect on the date of the notification of the election. Fast forward to the date of the notification of the election, I'm sitting in office. So I go and check with the leadership. Should I pursue the case? They said, no, the Supreme Court has said order. So I said, it's unfair. They said, never mind, you just go. We'll worry about all this next redistricting. Go face the election as it is. Now I got real problems because if you go from 22 to 16, you have that many less candidate opportunities for your party. And all politics is local, right? Very few people are that altruistic that they'll say, no, you're MLA, I don't care if I'm councillor or not. So first you have to kind of manage all the expectations inside. Then there's the whole coalition dharma. I worry I'll run out of time, so I'll close this up in 2 minutes. The net result is, of the 16, very unique to the DMK, we gave 3 of the 16 after being cut down from 22 to 16 two coalition partners. One of those didn't even get their papers in properly, so we had to run one person as an independent. And in the end, we won all 16, and we won all 16 very comfortably. One independent, two coalition partners, and 13 down from 22. Now I'm telling you, that's what political strength and success is. Everything else is show. You deliver victories. That is the only basis for saying whether somebody is a good politician or not. Now, I say I deliver victories because I build relationships, I deliver progress, I deliver outcomes, I keep my word. Therefore, I show better and better and better outcomes. Maybe that's true. Maybe there are other ways of doing it. Maybe money works. I can't tell. I haven't tried it. But this notion that somehow just because you have a large organization, or you hold large rallies, or you put a lot of posters and flags, therefore you are a strong man or powerful, is a completely bogus. It may have been true on one day, I don't know. Today, it has nothing to do with electoral outcomes. If you are smart politicians, you focus on the outcome that matters to you. Why are we in public life? We are in public life because we have a philosophy or a view of how the world ought to work, how society ought to be shaped, how it needs to progress. In our case, it is a more leftist, socialist, what we call uniquely a Dravidian social justice, inclusion, education view. We come to politics because we want to be elected to office so that we can create the laws and the schemes and the money allocation to propagate that view. That means the core of success is to get elected to government. And if the core of success is to get elected to government, then surely the measure of an individual's progress in politics is, can you deliver the vote, either for yourself or for your coalition partner or for your councillor candidate? Can you deliver the vote? Have you built that relationship with your voter base? And why I say every election is different is, if I look at the 2019 election and the 2021 election, on the surface they were very similar. 240,000 or so registered voters, 150,000 came out to vote. Then you say, oh, that means it's the same kind of outcome. But at the state level, it wasn't. It went from a 22.6% victory or 21.6% victory to an 8% victory. Something changed dramatically. Then I go and look at my voter turnout and I realize out of 150,000 people, 30,000 people were different. Just think about what I'm saying. 30,000 people who came to vote in 2019 did not come to vote in 2021, and hence roughly 30,000 new people who did not vote in 19 came and voted in 21 to arrive at the same aggregate of 150,000 or so. There are many reasons why people don't come, right? Some of them have moved away. We can see their voter ID somewhere else in Tamil Nadu. Some people have passed away. We see them in the death record. Some people have just stayed home and not come to vote. That's a large number, like 18, 20,000. Then you say, who are the new voters? Some people have moved into town. Their voter ID used to be somewhere else and now it's here. Some people are 18, 19-year-old people who didn't have the eligibility to vote in 19 are voting now. But then there's a large contingent, 15, 17,000 people who were in Madurai Central, who had a registered vote, who did not choose to come and vote in 19, who came and chose to vote in 21. If 30,000 people, that is 20% of the turnout, is different between two elections less than 2 years apart, what does any kind of sequential analysis really tell you? It tells you nothing. Because the margin of victory in most elections is 5%, 7%, 3%, 1%, 8%. 20% of the voters are different. So really, at the end of the day, this old British adage or English adage that says people vote with their feet is the core takeaway from this. People very rarely come and press button A in this election and button B or Sinnam B in the next election. What happens is either they got to be enthused enough to come out and vote, or they got to be disgusted enough to come and vote against. These are the two driving factors of voting patterns. And it is not at all clear to me that the old yardsticks of, print media, TV, big gatherings, big flexes, big shows of strength and all that has any real correlation to this. I think we are going into our own version of micro-targeting, The more we know our neighborhoods, the more we know our communities, the more we know their needs, the more we build rapport with them and relationships with them. That is the basis for electoral progress. And so I think if I were to conclude, there's probably a macro strategy and a micro strategy. Right? A macro strategy is to have consistency of policy, consistency of views, consistency of communication models. Ironically, most governments don't communicate nearly as well as political parties. Even the same political party, the amount of attention it spends on communication during an election, when it sits in office, it just drops off. Very rare exceptions. The party in government in Delhi is probably the rarest and most successful propaganda and communications government in the history of India. But most governments are not that sophisticated. I'm not saying it, but I'm saying they are smart, they know what they're doing. And therefore, I think there has to be a good macro strategy if you want to be successful at the level of a party or a movement or a large organization. But increasingly, the relative weightage of that is going down. And this micro strategy of communication, of connectivity, of social media, of individual touch is increasing. And I think, therefore, I said this back in 2018 in a podcast that was released, and I say it again. The need for a large organization or a base, or that you will only be successful if you have one of the major parties as your platform, I think is declining. It's declining all over the world for good and bad reasons. I was speaking to somebody who's a successful junior minister in one of the Australian states, and he was saying in Australia it used to be 40% right, 40% left, 20% undecideds that would determine the election. He says at best is 30% left, 30% right now, and the 40% swing is what really determines the elections. And that's why they have this, the federal government in Australia, they call it a teal coalition or a purple coalition, because it's got all these different kinds of voting patterns in it. It's not liberal, it's not Labour, it's some mix in the middle, a lot of independents, Greens, etc. That is happening everywhere. It's happening around the world. It's not just for us. But Tamil Nadu is probably closer to the global progress norm because we are an advanced state, because we have more per capita income, because we have higher education levels, because we have greater penetration of technology than, let's say, states in the Hindi belt. So in that sense, I would say, now is as good a time as there's ever been. If you want to look at Mr. Swaminathan's statement, படிச்சவங்க எதுவும் பேக்ரவுண்டில் அவங்க என் அப்பா மாடு செய்யலான்னு சொல்ல தேவையில்லாத சூழ்நிலையில் அரசியலுக்கு வந்து பொது வாழ்க்கைக்கு வந்து மக்களுடைய ஆதரவு பெற்று தேர்ந்தெடுக்கப்பட்டு பணியாற்றணும் என்றால் then the time has never been better than now. And it will probably keep getting better. How fast is the question? My own guess is faster than most people think. So I would say, for those who have the dedication and the staying power, the time is good for you. Thank you.